Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fish Keeping. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 10 of the best tropical fish for beginners. So in my opinion, there is definitely a difference between tropical fish and just other beginner fish. So tropical fish are usually fish that like heated water, and they usually like a pH of about 6 to 7.5. And pretty much all of these tropical fish will come from some sort of tropical environment, I guess. So yeah, for today's video, I've picked out 10 of the easiest tropical fish. All of them would suit a beginner perfectly. They require super simple care. They're all very peaceful fish, and they are, yeah, just great beginner fish. But without any further ado, let's just jump straight into today's video with the first fish on our list. So as for our first fish today, I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to anyone. We have tetras. So there is hundreds and hundreds of different types of tetras out there. The most common obviously being things like neon tetras, rummy nose tetras, cardinal tetras, all of those super small, fast moving tetras. So pretty much all South American tetras are beginner friendly. Obviously you've got African tetras as well, which are things like Congo tetras, and those aren't really beginner friendly. You could definitely keep them as a beginner, but they require a little bit more effort, and they're also a little bit more aggressive than the South American tetras. So some of the great things about the South American tetras, they come in a variety of colors. You can get a variety of patterns. They're all very peaceful, so they're great to add as a dither fish or just to add in a community aquarium. They're also all very active, so they're really great if you have a slow, like planted aquarium which doesn't have too much action. You can throw some tetras in there and they'll liven it up a lot. And obviously, like I said, they're very peaceful, so they can go with a variety of tank mates. So they can go with pretty much any other sort of tropical aquarium fish, as long as the other fish aren't too nippy or aggressive. As for the water parameters for these guys, obviously it does differ depending on what sort of tetra you get, but for the most part, tetras do like a temperature of about 22 to 27 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And they also like a pH of about 6 to 7.5. So yeah, like I said, it really does depend on what sort of tetra you get, but for the most part, a lot of tetras can go in those. Some prefer higher pH, some prefer lower pH, but they all do like to be in heated water. So one thing I would recommend if you are keeping these guys is making sure you have plenty of swim space. So because they're a open water swimmer and they school in relatively large schools, they do need plenty of space to swim. So you don't want to clutter up your aquarium too much with aquascape, plants, things like that. You do definitely need some plants in there just because it is very vital to keep tetras with plants. It makes it feel a lot more safe and a lot less stressed in your aquarium. But yeah, like I said, you do just want to make sure there's plenty of water for your fish to swim around in openly. But with that being said, tetras are definitely one of the best tropical beginner fish, and I would highly recommend them. Moving on to the next species of fish on our list, we actually have a catfish. We have Corydoras catfish. So Corydoras catfish are a super cool little fish. Much like the tetras, there's heaps of different varieties of these guys. So you can get big cories, small cories, there's all different patterns. And pretty much all of them are very beginner friendly. Obviously, like the tetras, there's a few of the more rarer varieties which are a little bit harder to keep. But for the most part, the common ones like panda cories, peppered cories, bronze cories, albino cories, they're all super easy fish to look after. And some of the great things about these guys is actually very beneficial to throw in your aquarium, so they can actually help keep your aquarium very clean. And a lot of the time they are actually sold as cleaner fish just for this. So these guys are very good at sifting through your substrate and sand, and by doing that they can help kick up any detritus into the water column, and that can make it easier for your filter to suck up. And another thing they'll actually do is they'll go around after all of your other fish have eaten, and they'll pick up any of the leftover food that's just lying there. So they are super great at minimizing any sort of ammonia spikes and making sure that your nitrogen cycle is stable. As well as that, they're actually a very peaceful fish, so they can literally go with any sort of fish. They can go with tetras, rasboras, guppies, endlers, angelfish, dwarf cichlids. Any of those sort of tropical aquarium fish are great tank mates for them. As for water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a temperature of about 22 to 26 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're going to want a pH of about 6 to 7.5. So one thing I would actually recommend with these guys is trying to keep them on a soft substrate. And the reason for that is because sometimes the barbels of the cories can actually be damaged on coarse or sharp gravel. And the barbels are basically their little whiskers, if you didn't know that. And if these cuts get infected, it can be super fatal. They can swell up. They can actually stop your cories from being able to eat. So I always think it's best to try and keep them in a soft substrate aquarium. But besides that, they are super easy to care for, and they're definitely another great beginner tropical aquarium fish. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we actually have a live bearer. We have Endlers. So Endlers are, in my opinion, by far the easiest fish to care for out of like every fish in the hobby. So some of the great things about these guys, they come in a variety of colors. You can get all sorts of different strains of Endlers. They're also very easy to breed, so being a live bearer, they do give birth to live young in your aquarium, and you don't need to do anything crazy to get them to spawn. As well as that, these guys are so peaceful, so they can literally go with any fish out there as long as the fish isn't too big and is going to eat them. But they can go with things like Tetras, rasboras, cherry shrimp, small catfish, bristlenose. Any sort of those tropical aquarium fish are great tank mates for them. As for water parameters for these guys, they don't actually really need to be heated, although I find it is best to heat them, and I would recommend a temperature of about 22 to 27 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're going to want a pretty high pH, so anything from about 7 to 8. However, Endlers are very hardy and they can definitely go in lower pHs, say 6 to 6.5. So the final thing I would recommend for these guys is making sure you have plants in your aquarium, particularly if you do want to keep the young. Endlers themselves aren't really going to eat the fry. Their mouths are pretty small and they can't really like eat the fry, I guess. But if you have them in an aquarium with other fish like Tetras or rasboras, those fry make the perfect meal for them. So having plants in there gives a little refuge for the fry to go and hide in if they need to get away. And on top of that, the plants are great anyway. They help make the colors of the Endlers pop a lot more, and they also help them feel a lot more safe. So yeah, plants are definitely a must if you are wanting to keep these guys. But with that being said, Endlers are definitely another great beginner tropical aquarium fish. Moving on to the next species of fish on our list, we have one that I don't actually really talk about often, and that's dwarf gouramis. So dwarf gouramis are a super cool little group of fish. You can obviously get the ones that are literally called dwarf gouramis. I'm not really sure what like species they are, but you can also get honey gouramis, chocolate gouramis, sparkling gouramis, croaking gouramis, licorice gouramis. Basically any sort of those smaller size gouramis are what I'm really talking about when I say dwarf gouramis. All of them are great beginner fish and they're super easy to care for. So dwarf gouramis are a little bit more on the aggressive side in comparison to the other fish on this list. They are very much like betta fish, and that's probably because they do come from the same family. But yeah, they can be a little bit aggressive, particularly males. They're definitely not as aggressive as male bettas are, but they can just be a little bit territorial every now and then. Although if you have them in a large enough community aquarium with plenty of other dither fish in there, they shouldn't be too aggressive. So these guys are, like I said, very easy to care for. And as for the water parameters you're going to want to keep them in, you do want a temperature of about 24 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is about 75 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're going to want a pH of about 6 to 7.5. Again, with these guys, they're another fish that you're going to want to have plenty of plants in there for. And the reason for that is just because the plants make their colors pop a lot more. So because they feel safer when there's plants around, they will put on some much nicer coloration, which is just a bonus, I guess. But besides that, these guys are another great beginner tropical aquarium fish, and I would highly recommend them. Moving on to the next group of fish on our list, we have one that's actually very similar to Tetras. We have Barbs. So Barbs, much like the Tetras, come in a variety of colors. There's so many different species of Barbs out there as well. And basically the only thing that sets these guys apart from the Tetras is they are just a little bit bigger. So Barbs are again a super peaceful fish. They can go with pretty much any sort of tropical aquarium fish as well. A few of the Barb species like tiger barbs can be a little bit nippy, so you don't want to be keeping them with super long finned fish like angelfish or guppies or things like that. For the most part, as long as you're keeping them with other very fast fish like Tetras or Danios, they should be fine. As for water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a temperature of about 22 to 26 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit. And another thing I would recommend, much like the gouramis, you do want to keep these guys with plants as well. So the plants will bring out a lot of those super nice colors in them, and it's just definitely super beneficial to have them. But yeah, with that said, barbs are another great tropical beginner fish, and I would highly recommend them. Moving on to the next species of fish on our list, we actually have a super cool little fish. We have Kuhli loaches. So Kuhli loaches are a very unique little fish. They look like a little eel, and they sort of just scurry around the bottom of your aquarium. So these guys are super beneficial as well, just like the Corydoras catfish. So actually dig in the sand, and they'll help dig out any of that detritus. They'll also help eat any of the leftover food as well. The only downside, in my opinion, to these guys is they're very shy and they aren't out too often, particularly if they're not used to your aquarium. Once you've had them in there for a little while, they should start getting familiar with it, and they'll come out a lot more often. But for the most part, they're actually a pretty nocturnal fish, so they don't really come out while the lights are on. But with that said, they are very peaceful. They can go with any sort of tropical aquarium fish, and they're also very easy to care for. So as for the water parameters, you're going to want a temperature of about 24 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 75 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're just going to want a pH anywhere between 6 to 7. Much like the Corydoras catfish, with these guys as well, I would recommend a soft substrate, just because they do like digging in the substrate. And if you have like gravel or a coarse substrate, they can't really dig through it as effectively. But yeah, with that being said, Kuhli loaches are another great little beginner tropical aquarium fish. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have another fish similar to Tetras. We have Danios. So Danios are a super active, fast moving aquarium fish, and they're by far one of the best beginner fish as well. They can go in heated water, they can go in unheated water, they can go in all sorts of pHs. They are just a super hardy little aquarium fish. As well as that, they are relatively peaceful. They can be a little bit nippy at times. However, if you get the long fin Danios, which are like these ones over here, those long fins actually slow them down a little bit, and that makes them a lot less nippy. So yeah, the long fin ones can go with practically any tropical aquarium fish, whereas the short fin ones can only really go with the fast moving fish or fish with not long fins. So as for water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a temperature of about 18 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is about 65 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're going to want a pH anywhere between 6.5 to 8. Now, I would recommend a pH of about 6.5 to 7. However, they can definitely go in those higher pHs as well. Like I said, they are super hardy, and the water parameters don't bother them too much. But yeah, with that being said, Danios are another great tropical aquarium fish, and I would highly recommend them. Moving on to the next species of fish on our list, we actually have another catfish. We have Bristlenose. So Bristlenose catfish are by far one of the most common cleaner fish out there. Pretty much every beginner gets one of these guys, and that's because they are super helpful when it comes to keeping these glass in your aquarium free from any algae. So because they are a sucking mouth catfish, they do eat a lot of the biofilm and algae that grows on surfaces in your aquarium, which can help a lot when it comes to keeping your aquarium clean. But another thing these guys will actually do is they will scavenge for leftover food as well, and when they're swimming across the bottom, just like the Corydoras catfish and the Kuhli loaches, that can also help pick up any detritus and kick it up into the water, which can make it a lot easier for your filter to suck up. Another great thing about these guys is they are literally so peaceful. So they don't really have a mouth kind of designed to nip at fish. So they can go with cherry shrimp all the way up to African cichlids. They can go with basically any sort of aquarium fish. As well as them being super peaceful, they're actually an armored catfish as well, which means they have these super strong armor platings along their body, and that means they can actually deal with quite a beating from other fish. So as for water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a temperature of about 22 to 27 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're going to want a pH anywhere between 6.5 to 7.5. But yeah, with that being said, Bristlenose catfish are another great beginner tropical aquarium fish. Moving on to the next species of fish on our list, we actually have another super popular fish. We have Betta fish. So bettas or fighting fish come in a variety of colors. They are one of the most colorful fish you can actually get in the hobby. As well as that, they're super easy to care for. So like I said, a lot of beginners keep this fish, and a lot of the time they are sold to go in small size tanks. Although I'd probably recommend a tank about 20 liters in size. That way you can get away with keeping them with some other fish. So things like Tetras, Corydoras catfish, Bristlenose, those are great tank mates for them. And the reason you want to have either either fast moving tank mates or super hardy tank mates is because fighting fish can actually be a little bit aggressive every now and then, particularly males. So you want to have tank mates that can easily get away or can withstand a little bit of a beating. As for water parameters for these guys, they do best in a temperature of around 24 to 27 degrees Celsius, which is about 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're going to want a pH of about 6.5 to 7.5. But yeah, with that being said, betta fish are another great tropical beginner aquarium fish. Moving on to the final species of fish on our list, we actually have another super colorful fish. We have killifish. So you can get all sorts of different types of killifish. Obviously, there's big ones, there's small ones, there's super colorful ones, there's a variety of patterns, and pretty much all of them are great community fish. There is a few like golden panchaks and blue panchaks and those larger sized panchaks, which are a little bit more aggressive and can't really be kept with too small fish. But there's also a variety of killifish that can be kept with small tropical fish as well. These guys, again, you're gonna need plants for their aquarium. It will help them bring out some super nice colors. As for water parameters for these guys, you're gonna want a temperature of about 23 to 27 degrees Celsius, which is about 74 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're gonna want a pH of about 6.5 to 7. Again, much like the tetras, this really does depend on what species of killifish you get, but for the most part, most of them should do just fine in those parameters. But yeah, with that being said, killifish are another great little tropical beginner aquarium fish. So that is actually gonna bring us to the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope this video helps a few of you guys out. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure to go down and subscribe, and while you're down there, smash the like button and comment your thoughts on today's video. I always love going down there and reading them all, and I try to reply back to as many comments as I can. Also, if you haven't done so already, make sure to go check out my website, aussiefishkeeping.com. I've got all sorts of fish, botanicals, and other aquarium products up there at the moment. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in that next video.